Welcome to our live event. It's all about Christmas in July. We turned over that calendar for July, and you know what's approaching faster than most quilters want to admit? It's going to be Christmas before we know it. I love working on Christmas when it's 95 degrees outside. Thank God for air conditioning. We are glad that you're joining us today. Jump in and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe drop in an idea of what kind of Christmas fabric you love to use. This one is a very traditional Christmas fabric, but I've used some moderns. I love to use florals. I love to use geometrics. And even if I can find Christmas batiks, that's a fun one too. So whatever your favorite genre of Christmas fabric, let us know what you might make Poinsettia place using your kind of fabric for Christmas. Now, my name is Colleen Tauke. I'm your instructor for this live event, and we are going to be working on some quilt as you go placemats. And the placemats are going to use up quite a bit of fabric, but there's always some leftover fabric, so you can always make a matching set of hot pads to go with your placemats. These would be great for hostess gifts. They'd be even good for those maybe getting married in the middle of summer, because by the time Christmas rolls around, they don't have a lot of Christmas sometimes, or just to decorate your own Christmas table. We are working in the pattern, so you can download the pattern if you haven't already. The QR code usually pops up at the bottom of our screen to take you to, there it is, the pattern for you to download. If you've already done that, grab something to write with so you can jot down a few notes along the way. If not, you can always rewatch and download the pattern at your leisure. I print mine in black and white sometimes just so that I can see the grayscale differences in the fabrics that are used. So you can really see the striping in the grayscale, which is a real good trick if you haven't if you're worried about placing a excuse me, lights and darks and medium fabrics within your project. So grayscale really does help out. So you print in black and white. That helps you learn about those lights, mediums, and darks and how things will read in your project when you're done. We have Kelly popping in from Arizona to say hello. Elaine says hello from Texas. And we are great. Jan says she's from Virginia and has learned so much quilting from watching these videos. We are so glad that you're joining us and that you find value in what we do for you each about every other week or so. Our theme for all of July is Christmas in July, because quilters we need that amount of time to get our projects done before Christmas rolls around. Plus, we know that the Christmas fabric is starting to roll into our favorite local quilt shops about this time. In fact, I was watching one yesterday here in Iowa, and they said, oh, Christmas fabric is just starting to come in. So if you're looking for the newest Christmas fabrics out there, you may be starting to see them pop up in your local quilt shops and even your big box stores. Bonnie says hello from Florida. Vicky says hello from Tennessee. Linda says hello from Alexandria, Virginia. Bridget from Belgium. Yay, I'm glad you found me. Marie says hello from Quebec, Canada. We have a lot of Canadian quilters who join us. Let's see. Linda says hello from, I had you already, Linda. I got you in there twice. And then they keep flowing faster than I can read. Let's see. Joanne says, I'm in Virginia. It's very hot. Well, it's hot here too, and very, very muggy. We usually have this kind of weather in August, but this year kind of the air you can wear has happened in late June, early July. So it's about 75% humidity, temperature probably going for 85 today. It's great weather to grow corn in the Midwest. Okay, we're going to jump into our project. Now, I created this one using pre-cuts. So when you fall in love that roll of pre-cuts and you don't know for sure what to do with it, you can make a couple of sets of 6 out of an entire roll of pre-cuts. So you can make multiples. The only thing is that in a pre-cut roll, you usually find 2 strips that are matching. So you need 2 matching strips to make a set of 6. So if you make others from your roll, they're going to be a little bit varied in the color combination. You could do totally scrappy if that's your intent, if you like scrappy. Some people like matchy. And these were originally made. My mom had this set and she loves things that match. So this set of 6 is done matching, and that's the way the pattern is written. So you'll need you'll need 10 strips of fabric, and there's 10 prints, and you'll need 2 of each out of there so that you can get enough, because these are cut 13 inches long. It's a little bit, it's a nice generous placemat. So you'll need some matching strips there. And then you also need, the one thing that I used in this project to make it go really, really fast were a set of, this is made by a company called Bosel. They're Craftex placemats. They're almost like a foam, they're a foam center, and you can buy them different in different ways. This one has fusible on both sides, so you can kind of hear the scratch. There's a little bit of fusible applied to both sides of these. I believe they're also available with fusible on one side, and I think you can also get them without fusible at all, but I won't, don't quote me on that. I do know that they come fusible. That made this really super fast to do, because you can attach your backing without having to use a basting spray. Then you're ready to go, your quilt as you go style across the pre-cut. They have these fun, nice little rounded corners, so they're super accurate. And I found that they're fun to use. At first I thought, really, I could cut batting, but these created such a nice, sturdy placemat that I really enjoyed using that. So it's in the pattern. It's called Bosel Craftex Placemats, Bosal. And I use 6 of these to create my set. You can also use batting. There's nothing wrong with putting batting within your placemat. You can do that. If you don't want to buy extra things, I'm just presenting an option for you to use. So you would need to cut your batting 13 by 18 or so, maybe a little bit larger, just to make sure that you can get your nice size cut out of that when you're done. You wouldn't even have to round the corners if you don't want to. So I'm giving you all the options possible. Lisa says, good morning from Wisconsin. And Sonia says, hello from Oklahoma. We are glad that you're joining in. Sandy says, hello from Austria. I would use a mix of floral patterns and some animal prints like reindeers. Oh, that would be fun. And some fabrics, patterns similar to those on the packaging papers. Okay, that's great. Everybody has the different kinds of possibilities in fabrics. I had some Santa print that I thought about using. It was a little larger print, so cutting a 2.5-inch strip kind of meant Santa was going to get sliced up a little weird. You could vary the strips and make them wider if you're cutting your own. So there's another option. Okay, so let's get started on creating our placemat. And we'll put the hot pads off to the side, and we'll talk about that just at the very end. Okay, we are working with our strips. Now, I have you cut 13-inch strips. So you're going to need 2 matching in order to get the 6 that you need. You'll be able to cut 3 off of each strip. So I've got some here already pre-cut, but I just wanted to, I had sample in front of you to remind you that you'll need 2 strips in order to get those 13s, because a lot of fabric, yeah, it's 44, 45, and there's some that have wide selvages, and you can't cut more than 3 off of a strip. So I've got my fabrics cut here ready to go. And these are kind of in a more modern Christmassy look with some dots. Try to, if you're cutting your own, remember to add things that have contrast so you see the difference between your strips. Then I'm going to bring in my Craftex, my shaped placemat here, and bring in the backing fabric. So your backing fabric can be anything. I used originally bright red in those, thinking that my mom could flip them over and use them for Valentine's Day too, since they were solid red on the back. But you can use anything on the back. Sometimes it's fun to hide another fabric on the back. Maybe it's St. Patrick's Day or something you want to put in the back. I had this really funky, modern, Christmassy kind of print, and that's going to go on the back side of my placemats. And since this is fusible, I'm going to line that up on here and try to get it as straight as possible. Doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, it's something you're eating off of. I've got my iron warmed up. Let's see if I can kind of angle my pressing mat so that you can see what we're doing here. And I'm going to press this on. Of course, in your studio, you'd have just a little bit more space than I do here in front of the camera, but we're going to heat that up and read the instructions for the amount of time it takes to fuse this to the back so that you don't overheat and overkill the glue. We don't want to add so much heat that the glue sinks in too much and then won't adhere to the back. But we want that to be adhered. It doesn't take very long. That's why I kind of liked using it, because it doesn't take much, and pretty soon, whoops, I need one little along the edge there. It hung off my pressing. It made it so easy. I didn't have to worry about fumes from anything, and it's attached and ready to go. Now, when I was working on this, I left my fabric big, and then later decided that it's better if it's trimmed so I can kind of see the edge. So I went ahead and tell you to trim the excess backing fabric. We're so used to, as quilters, having that backing be larger and extend beyond that we tend to like not even think about that part. And I hadn't either, but I found it much easier to clean up the edge before I started my piecing. And then later, I will have an idea of where the edge is when I want to trim the top portion by sandwiching it. And we're not going to be trimming off this placemat shape, the centerpiece. You know, we're used to trimming battings and things to be at a certain size, but since this is already predetermined, we want this trimmed up nice and neat up to, and it, you know, it doesn't have to be super exact. It's going to be on the inside later when we put binding over the edge. And we're going to talk about bias binding because we have a rounded edge and we want those nice pretty corners. So we're going to be using bias binding. So if that's something new, maybe that's a new skill for you to learn in this project. Okay, we've got the back. It's adhered, so it'll just ride along as we move this around our cutting surface. Next thing to do is to go in and mark the center. Now these placemats are like I said, they're 18 inches wide. Let's get this so that my ruler. And I already marked the center spot at 9. So I marked 9, so I know where my middle of my placemat is, because I want to work outward, because we're doing a quilt as you go. Some people will start on one side and work over. Totally fine to do that. It's just in my mind, I worked from the center out. So I'm just going to teach you the method that I had. And then I marked 1/4 inch, and let's put it this way, so it's off to the left of that, so that I know where the cut edge of my first strip has to fall. And I'm just using a friction pen here. It's going to be on the inside. It won't damage the fabric or anything. You can use anything that you have as a marking tool that's visible on light. So whatever you have that you can see on the light center fabric. And then, since you have a mark and it's 1/4 inch to one side, we're going to start with our first two fabrics. And I'm going to pick, now, when I was working on these kinds of things, I tend to lay them out on my pressing surface to try and get kind of an arrangement of the colors. I don't have all 10 here, but if I were working on the whole thing, I would lay everything out and try to, you know, offset the reds and the greens a little bit so that I would be able to look at it and go, okay, I need one more strip. I need the polka dot. That's what I needed, because I'm going to do half of a side. So we're going to cut one more piece here quick. And remembering that those are cut at 13 inches. 13. When I was preparing my pieces upstairs this morning, really double check yourself to make sure that you're using the right end of your ruler, or your pieces will be the wrong size. The number 13 will pop up and you'll think, oh, I have it right. Make sure that you have from the one on side that you're actually cutting a 13-inch strip. There we go. Now I have all the pieces for 1/2 of my placemat. And let's see, I want to start with this really pretty floral in the very center. Now I'm going to lay them here so that I remember what order I like them in. And I kind of like the red to be every other one or so. That to me is pleasing, at least. I have the first strip in place, and I have it right side up. And I'm aligning the left side of my strip with that marked line I have going across my project. Susan says, good morning from Kansas. And Judy's popping in saying, we learned so much. I'm glad that you guys enjoy the process here. We try to bring you fun projects that everyone will enjoy. Okay, second strip I had selected, right sides together. So the pretty sides are meeting. And I have them aligned along that marked line that I created. And then I'm going to stitch my 1/4-inch seam along there. Now, remember which side you have the marked line. Double check to make sure you get under the machine properly. Some machines will not want to feed something thick like this. So remember your walking foot. Others of you may have an integrated walking foot. Some brands have just a lever that pops down and helps the foot feed the fabrics through the machine. Others do not. Others have to go to the walking foot. Try it to see how well it goes and see if you need your walking foot on. Some machines will feed through fine. I have different machines that I use, and different ones work differently. So I'm just giving you the option, knowing that a walking foot may be the assistance you need to feed it through and get that even 1/4-inch seam allowance, and making sure that putting on a walking foot on camera is always an interesting adventure. Okay, I have to get the piece now. For some reason, I've got it caught. I need to have the bar that goes up with the uptake and around the needle. There we go. And then you can do it when you're off camera in a split second, but as soon as you put a camera on, it's a whole nother thing. Okay, make sure that it's tightened properly and seated in there so that you can do your stitching. Have that screw really loosened up. And some machines work so fast. Others are interesting to work with. Dual feed on the machine I have upstairs. I really like the dual feed. It gives a very even distribution as it goes through the machine. Others I'm sorry. I think I've lost my train of thought there. Other machines work differently. You will know the personality of your sewing machine. I'm going to put just a few pins in here to hold this as I slide it through the machine, just because we have layers and things like to shift otherwise. And if you know me, I don't usually like to pin very much, just enough to hold things in place. Okay, and then you're going to do your best 1/4-inch seam across, and I have to get myself situated here behind the machine. Okay. Take out the pins as you approach them. It is always a little tricky when you're using a dual feed or your walking foot to know exactly where your 1/4-inch seam allowance is. If it gives you pause and you're worried about that, you can always mark your seam allowance on the fabric also. And I have projects behind me here. Okay, almost to the end. Don't worry if your fabrics shift just a tiny bit. That's okay, because you know what? As quilt as you go, no one's going to know the difference. It will hold in place well enough to get to the end here. So there we go. Right sides together. We had, as we stitched across, then we're going to open up these fabrics and we're going to take it over to the iron. But you have to use the nose of the iron because this area has that glue and it's heat sensitive. So we don't want to layer iron on the entire thing, or you're going to all hate me because your iron will adhere to it. So use the nose of your iron just to kind of nudge those fabrics, just to keep them in place. So I'm taking it over to the iron and I'm just going to use the tip of the iron to just fuse that over just to get it warmed up in place so that it will hold for the next strip to be put in place. Along one strip and then the other, just enough to hold it in place so we don't have to clean our iron later. That's the fun part about Quilt As You Go. Later, you don't have to add any stitching if you don't want to. The layers are all adhered all the way to the back, all the way through, so everything's going to hold in place. Now, I had lined up to do the green next, the polka dot. So again, we just go right sides together and work our way across. I'm going to try, let's see, here we go. Without pinning, it may shift just a little bit, but I think in this case, we won't have any problem. It's not as long of a seam as if you were trying to machine quilt across an entire quilt top. Just trying to get that 13 inches stitched. There's not much shift because the fabrics kind of adhere to each other on a distance this short. But if you have issues, I have a project there, stopping the flow of stitching. There we go. Now this is a project you could produce 24 of these in a short amount of time. It really would not take much to create a lot of these, and they're so fun to do because you're quilting as you go. You don't have to go back later to do any of that stitching that you have to worry about. Well, what am I going to create? Or what am I going to quilt here? What design am I going to do? It's all already in place, ready to go. And you just keep adding your strips. And now you can see why I talked about if you wanted to use wider pieces, cutting your own strips, you could put a wide strip down the very center and then do your 2.5-inch strips down the sides. And that would be a really cute design too. If you have something that's, that larger scale design, that maybe Santa faces, or maybe you have like a nativity scene, or you have a reindeer that you wanted to center on a strip, you could do that too. So this is kind of just a jumping off point for some really fun projects for you to create. Linda says, good morning from Canada. We're glad that you're watching and having fun with our Christmas in July event. I'm going to just do one more here, and then we're going to talk about the binding, and if you're not using this product as your base, because if you don't have a fusible surface like this, you could purchase, here's another option, you could purchase fusible batting, because there are fusible battings out there and would work very similarly. It would be a little thinner in the base of underneath your fabric, but it would also work. Okay. Now, if you're using just batting instead of a fusible like this, you might need to be using a spray-based, or if you don't like aerosol kinds of things, this is the KK2000. It just takes a tiny bit to hold it in place. You can always use glue stick, fabric glue stick. You can use the school glue glue stick. I did have an incident yesterday that gave me a bit of a scare. I was working with a school glue kind of glue stick, and it's purple. and I went to mist something to put a little steam in the project, and the purple bled through. Gave my heart pause because I was like, oh no, is this purple going to be permanent? It's supposed to be a washable glue. But that bright purple was showing up on a very light color, and it washes out. So if you do something like that, know that it will wash out. Okay. Fun thing. Look, we almost have half of a placemat already covered. Keep doing that all the way to the outer edge. And yes, the last strip is just going to be a nudge on the outer edge, like this on each side. It really is not really that noticeable that there's just narrow strips on each edge, but that way you know for sure you have everything covered. So once you get, I'm going to do just a portion of that so we can talk about that curve and doing our bias binding. And the nice thing about bias binding is it goes around that curve really nice. I'm going to tell you a little bit about bias binding here, but we do have tutorials available that teach more in detail how to cut bias binding, how to define bias binding and why we use it. And I think there's even maybe more than one video out there that will show you more detail about bias, so that you can learn more about when we use it, why we use it, why it's to our advantage to use it, especially in doing curves. But I need to finish this out just to the corner here so we can, and I'll just do part of the next strip so we have that corner so we can talk about that. Because if you're doing this on batting and you decide you want to just use a rectangle and not have that curved edge, totally fine. You can just use straight of grain binding, which means you will need less fabric. Using bias binding always takes a little bit more yardage in order to get those diagonal pieces cut. And I'm just going to stop there so we have our outer edge. This is where I wanted to talk about the trimming and why we trimmed the backing fabric early on. When you get done with those last strips to the outer edge, you'll see on the back, okay, it hangs over, but I need to trim and I need to know where that edge is so I'm up against the center portion of the fabric. And you can use a rotary cutter, you can use your scissors, whichever is more comfortable for you. But once you trim that outer edge, then you'll have that nice curved edge that we're going to create our binding for. Okay, now let's step into bias binding real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about how it's applied. This is only half a yard of fabric. It calls for the yardage estimated to make bias binding for 6 placemats in your instructions. Normally, we would cut straight of grain binding, and that means from the selvage to the fold, we're cutting strips off that are 44 wide in order to cut our binding strips. But in this case, we need more give in our binding. And by cutting this at a 45-degree angle to the weave of the fabric, that gives it stretch. And it gives us the flexibility to get around the corner. So I'm going to open this up. And we're going to cut a strip of binding, and those tutorials that we have about bias binding will help you in cutting those strips, more detailed there. But by using your ruler, there are all of these angles on our rulers that we don't use very often, but we need that 45-degree line to help us line this up in order to get the binding that we need. Now the binding is cut 2.5 inches. I did that a little bit more substantial. Some people use 2 1/4 inch binding, but a lot of times I will use the 2.5 just to give it more stability to the outer edge. Jennifer is popping in from Delaware and saying, oh, what a fun project. We are glad that you're joining us. We are giving you all kinds of ideas because it might be Christmas in July, but I bet you could think of ways to use this pattern to create placemats for the whole year and different themes. So I've lined up my ruler. This is a straight edge of my fabric. I've lined up the 45-degree line with that cut edge there. And that way, when I cut the diagonal, I will know that this is a bias edge, that angle that I've got straight of grain, cross grain. That's the bias, that diagonal across. And we're going to cut off 2.5-inch strips in order to get the pieces that we need. And I need to have it all the way on the mat in order to cut through and not nick my table. Why do I know that? I think my kitchen table's taken a little beating at times when I've gotten overzealous and forgotten where my mat was at. Okay, you can cut 45-inch or 2.5-inch strips off the diagonal, and you're going to join those together in order to make your binding strips. Similar to what you would do if you were doing straight of grain, but you're going to have some funny angles at the end. That's why I wanted to cut a couple of these in order to address joining those together and getting those to lay nicely. And my strip is just a little longer. Here we go. 2.5-inch wide. Now there are methods for making continuous bias binding. All kinds of different ways of doing it. This is just a very traditional approach to creating the bias binding, just cutting off strips and then linking them together. And you'll end up with pieces like this, and they'll have angles on the end, and you need to join those together. Sometimes the angles work out, but here, this one, the angles work out that joining those together. But if they bother you at any point in the process, just cut them square. Go back to what you know. Don't worry about those angles. If you don't like working with them, we're going to take them away, because sometimes they just mess us up and trying to get our 1/4-inch or get our pieces joined together. So sometimes we just, like I said, go back to what we know. Right sides together. Do the diagonal seam across to join them together. Now, be very cautious, because we don't pull and tug on your fabric here, because they are bias cut. They do have stretch to them. So we want to make sure that we are, whoops, that in the center, so that we are joining those together gently so we don't distort them. We want a nice straight piece of binding when we're ready to put it onto our project. The give is going to be in the process of getting around the corner. Whoops. Press your foot up. Okay, we've joined those together just like you do for straight of grain. Some people press their seam allowances to one side. I tend to press mine open to reduce the bulk on my binding. And then we're going to go in and we're going to trim just like you do on others. I'm just going to trim away my excess triangles. No one needs extra thickness on the edge of a placemat. And then we're going to do the press in half. So we're ready to put it on. Now this is the place where you really want to be gentle so that you don't distort your binding. We don't want it to get skinny, because if you pull on it and tug on it, it's going to collapse on you and get narrower. So be very gentle as you press it in half so that you get it ready to put onto your placemat. Now I'm just going to use a portion of it to get around the corner there. I'm going to take part of this off just so that and I can show you how distorted it can be. If I cut this strip to be 5 inches long, okay, it's 5 inches long to start. Once I get this folded and I pull on it, it can now stretch up to 5.5, almost 5 3/4 inches. So it's got some give. You can see how it gets skinny when it's got some give to it, kind of like legs on a folding chair. So it has stretch. And that's where we have to be careful when we go to put it around the edge of our placemat. So let's see, we got our corner here. We're going to work on this edge right here. You're used to putting binding on quilts, I know. So that means the beginning, the ending, you know how to do that portion. It's just getting around that corner that can be a little bit tricky in order to get the fullness in the right place. Oops, I'm going to take my walking foot back off because I'm much better at maneuvering the project under just a regular sewing foot. If I can get a hold of it. Some machines are easier to take your walking foot off than others. The little tiny screw that they put on the post makes it difficult sometimes. But everything good out there that's worth doing, we can put up with, correct? Okay. Thank heavens for a screwdriver that has a long handle. Get that tightened back in place. And slip that back on. Make sure that you have I have mine set for my 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to stitch around that curve. And then you can see the magic of how it turns to the back side so beautifully. It looks like it was put on and manufactured in big factory almost. Okay, we're going to use 1/4 inch seam allowance for putting on our binding. I'm putting it on the right side because I'm going to turn it to the back, and I'm going to hand stitch mine down. Now, if you like to do machine finishing, reverse that. If you like to machine finish, you're going to stitch your binding back of the placemat, bring it around front, and top stitch it in place. I'm kind of a traditionalist. I like to do the hand binding onto the back. I don't know why. I usually like to be finished quick, but that finishing by hand to the back has always been something that I look forward to. That last little piece of the project that I get to kind of put my signature on. I like doing that portion. So I tend to be a hand finisher. Okay, I'm going to show you how much fullness I left while I'm putting my binding on. Usually our binding's laying flat on our projects. And when you're doing curves, it's going to look ruffly, and that's okay. You can see how it stands up off the surface. You're really worried more about the outer edge, getting the cut edges to line up, getting that stitch down, because when you trim away, where'd my scissors go? I lost them. I'm going to trim this just so that's not in camera angle. When you get done and you wrap that to the back, it just lays down so pretty. It knows exactly where to go because of the flexibility of the bias binding. So on the back, it's almost got itself in place already. Look at how nice that's even going to lay on the back side of the placemat. So by doing the bias binding for that outer edge, putting it on and leaving that fullness at the corners, it will roll to the back and have a beautiful finished edge on your placemat. So when you're working on the placemats, then you have all your corners finished out just like that. And you can see the channel quilting on the back. If you decide to do more quilting, you can do some other quilting in the channels if you prefer, but this is close enough so that the fabrics won't shift, the inside won't shift when washed. And then you can take the leftover pieces that you have or other strips from, see, this fabric is leftover from cutting. This print, I believe, is this one. The little berries from the outer edge here. So your little pieces left can turn into hot pads for your kitchen. And I believe I know I used leftover batting when I created those, and I think I put 3 squares together. So 3 layers of a cotton or a cotton blend batting. I did the same exact method, though I think I used a glue stick, if I remember right, because it's not the bosal inside, it's just batting inside there. And I think I must have used Insulbrite, the metallic. I can hear it inside there. So I probably used the Insulbrite layer and a couple layers of batting, so they're nice and fluffy, so they'll protect your hands while you're baking. Did the exact same flip and stitch method there. Rounded the corners in a similar fashion, but a little bit sharper curve there than the placemats, just to fit the shape. and then turn those to the back and finished off the edge. So the set is ready to go for Christmas. So Christmas in July, it's time to start planning. It's time to go shopping for some Christmas fabrics, or go dig out those really great Christmas fabrics you've been putting away and create a project that will bring Poinsettia Place to your Christmas table. Thanks for joining me.